If someone had told me that the most dangerous place I would ever stand was a hospital corridor in England, I would have laughed. Hospitals are meant to save lives. They are meant to be safe. They are meant to be where families wait, pray, and hope. But that night, the hospital was where my husband decided I was no longer necessary. My name is Emily Collins. I am 36 years old, and for 11 years, I believed I was married to a good man, a hard-working man, a responsible man, a man who built bridges and towers for a living, and came home each evening covered in dust and tired smiles. Daniel Collins was a civil engineer. Construction sites were his world. Danger was something we spoke about quietly, never too loudly, as if saying it out loud might invite it in. That is why when the phone rang at 12:24 inches the morning, my heart knew before my mind did. "Mrs. Collins?" a man asked. "Yes. This is Royal Berkshire Hospital. Your husband has been involved in a serious workplace accident, a scaffold collapse, concrete impact. He is in critical condition and being taken into emergency surgery." Critical. The word did not echo. It struck. I remember standing in the middle of our living room in Reading, the rain hammering the windows, the television playing to no one. I remember my knees giving way. I remember thinking, this cannot be real. Only hours earlier, Daniel had kissed my forehead and told me not to wait up. Only hours earlier, we had argued about the new life insurance policy he insisted we needed. "If anything ever happens to me," he said, smiling, "you will be looked after." At the time, I thought he was reassuring me. Now, I know he was warning me. If this story grips you even slightly, stay with me, because what happened next was not an accident, not bad luck, and not fate. It was a plan, and I was never meant to survive it. I drove to the hospital as if the road itself were trying to stop me. The rain had thickened, turning the streets of Reading into long black mirrors. Every traffic light felt like an insult. Every second felt stolen. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely keep them on the steering wheel. Daniel was a civil engineer. Construction sites were dangerous by nature. Scaffolds failed. Concrete cracked. Accidents happened. I had always known that. But knowing something is possible and being told it has finally happened are two very different things. As I drove, my thoughts circled back to one moment I had tried to forget. Just 1 month earlier, Daniel had sat across from me at our kitchen table. A quiet Sunday evening. Nothing broken. Nothing raised. Nothing suspicious. He slid a thin folder toward me. "I think we should take out a new life insurance policy," he said. "Work is getting riskier." I frowned. "Why now?" He didn't answer straight away. He took a slow sip of tea, then said, "It should be in your name." That stopped me. "In my name?" I asked. "Why?" He smiled. The same smile I had trusted for 11 years. "So there are no delays," he said. "If something happens, everything goes straight to you." I laughed then. I truly did. "Daniel, you're the one on scaffolding and under cranes," I said. "Why would it be in my name?" His jaw tightened, just for a fraction of a second. "It's practical," he replied. "Trust me." And I did. I signed. The hospital appeared ahead of me far too quickly. The automatic doors of A and E slid open, and the sharp smell of disinfectant rushed at me. "My husband, Daniel Collins. Construction accident," I said breathlessly at the desk. The nurse typed quickly, nodded, and pointed. "Surgical wing, 4th floor." The lift was too slow. I turned and ran for the stairs, my breath tearing at my chest as I climbed. By the time I reached the 4th floor, my legs were numb. The corridor stretched ahead of me, white, silent, endless. At the far end, I saw the doors. Operating Theatre 3. A red light glowed above them. In session. This was it. The moment my life would either break or survive. I started towards the doors, and then a hand closed around my wrist. "Don't go in." The voice was low, urgent, shaking. I spun around. A nurse stood there, young, her face pale beneath the fluorescent lights. Her badge read Hannah Lewis. "What are you doing?" I snapped. "My husband has been crushed by concrete." Her grip tightened instead of loosening. "You need to come with me," she whispered. "Now." "Let go of me," I said, panic rising. Have you lost your mind? Her eyes flicked past me. Toward the operating theatre. He is not dying, she said quietly. And if you walk through those doors, you will. The corridor seemed to tilt. What are you talking about? I whispered. There is no time, she said. You have to trust me. I followed her gaze. Through the narrow window in the theatre doors, I saw movement. A man in surgical scrubs. A familiar posture. A familiar walk. Daniel. He was upright. Walking. Not being rushed. Not supported. My heart stuttered. Then I saw who was beside him. A woman. Her hair. Her coat. The way she leaned in slightly as she spoke. Sophie. Our neighbour. The woman who shared meals at our table. Who laughed in our kitchen. Who clinked glasses with us on quiet weekends. My mind flashed through memories I had never questioned. The way she always knew when Daniel would be home. The way she laughed just a little too easily at his jokes. The way Daniel always suggested she join us. She gets lonely, he had said. It's nice to have community. The doctor walked ahead of them. Daniel followed. Sophie followed Daniel. Not like a stranger, not like a neighbour. Like someone who belonged there. My stomach dropped. Hannah leaned closer, her voice barely a breath. Your husband was not brought in from a construction site, she whispered. There was no scaffold collapse, no concrete injury. I couldn't breathe. The file was changed, she continued, by someone who should never have touched it. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Hannah's eyes widened. Please, she whispered. Come with me. She pulled me across the corridor and pushed open a narrow door hidden behind a vending machine. Inside was darkness, metal lockers, the smell of stale coffee and sweat. Get inside, she said. Lock the door. Do not make a sound. What about my husband? I whispered. She looked at me, and in her eyes was not fear, it was certainty. This surgery is not for him, she said. It is a trap. The door closed. The lock clicked. I stood alone in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs. And in that moment, as the truth settled into my bones, one thought became terrifyingly clear. Daniel had not asked for insurance to protect me. He had asked for it to make sure I disappeared. The door closed behind me. The lock clicked once. And just like that, the world shrank into darkness. I stood frozen, my back pressed against cold metal lockers, my breath trapped somewhere between my chest and my throat. The room smelled of old coffee, disinfectant, and something else I couldn't place at first. Fear. It was the kind of fear that didn't scream. It waited. I could hear my own heartbeat. Too loud, too fast. I slid down onto the floor slowly, afraid even the sound of fabric brushing metal would give me away. Outside, the corridor was silent. No shouting, no rushing footsteps, no voices calling my husband's name. That silence was wrong. I pressed my ear against the door, holding my breath. Nothing. Then, faintly, I heard it. A soft hiss. The unmistakable sound of heavy theatre doors opening. My pulse spiked. I crawled closer to the narrow gap beneath the door and lifted myself just enough to see through the thin line of light. The first person to step out was a man in blue surgical scrubs. Dr. Matthew Ward. He pulled his mask down to his neck, his movements unhurried, almost relaxed. He did not look like a man who had just fought to save a life. He peeled off his gloves and dropped them into a bin. They were stained with blood, too dark, too thick. My stomach twisted. Then I saw him, Daniel, my husband. He was not on a trolley. He was not being rushed by nurses. He was not unconscious. He walked out on his own 2 feet. He rolled his shoulders, stretched his neck, flexed his fingers as if he had been sitting too long. Healthy, strong, completely unharmed. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop the sound that tried to escape. This had to be a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by shock. But then someone else stepped out behind him. A woman. She was tall, well-dressed, her coat perfectly tailored, her hair carefully styled, as if she were heading to dinner rather than standing outside an operating theatre. Sophie, our neighbour. The woman who borrowed sugar from my kitchen. The woman who laughed with me over wine. The woman who hugged me at Christmas. She walked close to Daniel. Too close. She handed him a bottle of water, her fingers brushing his hand in a way that was not accidental. It went exactly as planned, Daniel said, his voice calm, almost cheerful. Dr. Ward chuckled softly. The accident report is already logged. Scaffold collapse, concrete impact. Textbook. Sophie smiled. I told you she would panic. She always does. Daniel laughed. That laugh. The one that used to make me feel safe. She'll be on her way, he said. Probably crying her eyes out. Dr. Ward nodded. When she arrives, I'll tell her the surgery was successful but complicated. Sophie tilted her head. And then? And then, Dr. Ward continued smoothly, I'll explain that we found something else during the operation. My blood ran cold. A clot near the liver, he went on. Very dangerous. Needs immediate attention. Daniel smiled. High-risk procedure. Exactly, the doctor said. With anesthetic complications. Sophie's eyes glittered. And if she doesn't wake up? Dr. Ward shrugged. Tragic, but unavoidable. I felt something crack inside my chest. This was not an affair. This was not betrayal. This was murder. Planned. Rehearsed. Discussed like a business meeting. Daniel leaned back against the wall, relaxed. Once it's done, the insurance pays out within weeks, he said. We leave. Start over. Sophie laughed softly. I've always wanted to live somewhere sunny. Dr. Ward checked his watch. We should move him to recovery, he said. He needs to look weak. Daniel nodded. I'll play the role. They started walking down the corridor, their footsteps fading slowly. I remained on the floor, shaking, my nails digging into my palms. The surgery was never for him. It was for me. Outside, voices approached. My heart slammed against my ribs. The handle on the locker room door began to turn, and in that moment, I realized something far worse than the plan itself. They believed I was already on my way, and I was about to walk straight into their trap. The handle stopped turning. Footsteps passed by the door. I did not move. I did not breathe. I stayed pressed against the lockers, counting the seconds by the sound of my own pulse, until the corridor outside settled back into its unnatural silence. That was when my body finally reacted. My hands began to shake. Not violently. Not yet. Just enough to remind me that what I had witnessed was real. My husband had walked out of an operating theatre smiling. My neighbour had stood beside him like she belonged there. And a doctor had calmly explained how I would die on a hospital table. This was no longer fear. It was clarity. The door opened slowly. I flinched, ready to scream. But it was Hannah. She slipped inside, locked the door behind her, and leaned against it for a moment as if her legs could barely hold her. You saw them, she said quietly. I nodded. I heard everything, I replied. My husband is alive, healthy, and they are planning to kill me. Hannah closed her eyes for a brief second. Then you understand why you cannot confront him, she said. Not yet. She crouched in front of me, lowering her voice. They are expecting you to be hysterical, she continued, confused. Grateful, easy to guide. I swallowed. What do I do? You play the role they wrote for you, she said. But you do not sign anything, no matter how much they push. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded document. These are the consent forms, she explained. Emergency procedure, high risk, standard language. My stomach turned. If you sign these, she said, looking me directly in the eye, they can legally put you under tomorrow. A knock echoed down the corridor. Hannah stiffened. They are moving him to recovery now, she whispered. You need to see him. My heart twisted. I cannot look at him, I said. Not after what I heard. You must, she replied. Because if you don't, they will know something is wrong. She helped me to my feet and wiped the tears from my face with the sleeve of her uniform. Let yourself cry, she said. But not too much. Shock looks quiet. She opened the door and guided me back into the corridor. As we walked, I felt as though I were watching myself from above. A woman, moving forward. A woman whose life had already been decided by others. If you are listening to this right now, I need you to understand something. Evil does not always arrive screaming. Sometimes it arrives wearing a familiar face and holding your hand. The recovery ward was dim. Machines hummed softly. Curtains whispered as we passed. Then I saw him. Daniel lay in the bed, pale, his arm wrapped in a bandage, a monitor blinking steadily beside him. He looked weak, fragile, convincing. He turned his head when he heard my footsteps. "Emily," he murmured, his voice hoarse, perfectly rehearsed. I rushed forward, gripping his hand. "Oh my God," I whispered. "What happened?" He squeezed my fingers gently. "The scaffold collapsed," he said. "I don't remember much after that." A lie, delivered without hesitation. Dr. Ward stepped forward. "The surgery went well," he said calmly, "but it was complicated." My chest tightened. "We found something unexpected," he continued. "A clot, close to the liver." Daniel's eyes flicked to the doctor for just a fraction of a second. "Enough." "It is dangerous," Dr. Ward said, "and it requires another procedure." "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning," he replied. "Early." Hannah stood silently behind me. Dr. Ward handed me the papers. "We need your consent," he said. "In case of complications." My hands trembled as I took them. The words blurred. Anesthetic risk, internal bleeding, fatal outcome. Daniel watched me closely. "Emily," he whispered. "You trust them, don't you?" I looked at my husband, the man I had loved, the man who had planned my death, and I nodded. "Of course," I said softly. "If you are still listening, stay with me." Because what happened next was the moment I stopped being their victim and started becoming their problem. I did not sign. Instead, I lowered the papers. "I need a moment," I said. "I'm in shock." Dr. Ward hesitated. Daniel tightened his grip on my hand. "Take your time," he said gently. "We have all night." As we left the ward, Hannah leaned close. "Tonight," she whispered, "we gather proof." My heart pounded. "How?" I asked. She met my eyes. "By going where they believe you are too afraid to go." Somewhere deep below the hospital, alarms waited to be triggered. Cameras waited to be checked, and the truth waited to be uncovered. Behind us, the curtains around Daniel's bed closed softly, and inside that quiet room, they began planning my final surgery. Hannah did not rush me. That alone told me how serious this was. She walked beside me, down the corridor at a normal pace, her shoulders slightly hunched, her expression calm. Anyone watching us would have seen nothing more than a nurse escorting a shaken wife. Inside, my body was anything but calm. Every step felt like I was walking on glass. Every sound made my spine tighten. The hospital had changed. The same walls, the same lights. But now, everything felt layered, like there were rooms behind rooms, secrets behind doors I had never noticed before. We turned a corner and stopped beside a fire exit. Hannah checked the corridor. Empty. She leaned close, her voice barely more than breath. "From this moment on, you do not react," she said. "No matter what you hear, no matter what you see." I nodded. "If they sense fear turning into awareness," she continued, "they will move faster." She pressed a small access card into my hand. "Basement level," she said. "Medical records, server room, staff only." My fingers closed around the card. "I don't know what I'm looking for," I whispered. "You'll know," she replied, "because the truth leaves traces." She squeezed my wrist once, then straightened and walked away, disappearing back into the ward as if nothing had happened. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, breathing, grounding myself. Then I opened the fire door and stepped inside. The stairwell was narrow and dimly lit. Concrete walls, metal railings cold beneath my hand. Each step downward felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. As I descended, my thoughts betrayed me again. Daniel's voice, Daniel's laugh. Daniel standing in our kitchen 1 month earlier, telling me the insurance was for my protection. I had lived beside my own executioner. The basement smelled different, cooler, damp. The faint hum of machinery vibrated through the floor. I swiped the card. The door opened. Rows of filing cabinets lined the room. Monitors blinked softly. Cables snaked across the ceiling like veins. I froze when a shadow moved at the far end. A man in scrubs, his back turned. My heart slammed. I ducked behind a cabinet, my breath locked in my chest. Seconds passed. Then he walked out, pushing a trolley, whistling under his breath. I waited until the sound of his footsteps faded before moving again. I found Daniel's name faster than I expected. The file was thick. Too thick for a man who had supposedly been crushed under concrete hours earlier. I opened it. No internal bleeding. No fractures. No trauma. Perfect vitals. Normal scans. Admission time. Not from a construction site. From a private vehicle. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. This was it. This was proof. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page. Hands steady now. Mind sharp. If you are listening to this and wondering why I didn't run, why I didn't scream, understand this. Fear paralyzes. Truth mobilizes. I moved on. The server room door was heavier. Restricted access. The card worked. Inside, the air was colder. The hum louder. Rows of servers blinked in synchronized rhythm. I found the camera logs. Emergency bay. Main entrance. Side corridor. And there it was. Daniel walking into the hospital hours earlier. Not carried. Not supported. Laughing. Beside him. Sophie. She leaned into him as they walked. Her hand brushed his arm. Familiar. Intimate. I copied the footage. My phone vibrated. A message. Unknown number. Where are you, Emily? My blood ran cold. Another vibration. Dr. Ward is looking for you. They knew. I backed away from the terminal. The lights flickered. Then the screen went black. A message appeared. Access denied. My heart pounded. Footsteps echoed outside the server room. Closer. Slower. Not running. Hunting. I slipped the phone into my pocket and scanned the room. One exit. The same door. The handle rattled. And in that moment, I understood something with terrifying clarity. They were not afraid of killing me. They were afraid of what I had just seen. The door began to open. And I had seconds to decide whether to hide, fight, or run. I did not run. Not at first. I stood there in the server room, my back pressed against cold metal, my breath shallow and controlled, listening to the slow rhythm of footsteps outside the door. They were not panicked. They were not shouting. They were calm. That was the most terrifying part. People who panic make mistakes. People who stay calm believe they are still in control. I forced myself to think. Hannah's words echoed in my head. Truth leaves traces. I glanced at the black screen in front of me. Access denied. They had shut me out. But shutting me out meant something else, too. They knew exactly where I was. The handle rattled again. I moved. Quietly. Carefully. I slid between two rows of servers, keeping my phone pressed flat against my thigh, willing it not to vibrate again. My mind raced back over everything I had seen. Daniel walking into the hospital. Sophie at his side. The altered medical file. The fake accident. And the insurance. Always the insurance. 1 month earlier. His insistence. His smile. I had not been careless. I had been hunted. The door opened. A slice of corridor light cut into the room. Dr. Ward stepped inside. He did not call my name. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, surveying the room like a man checking his property. Emily, he said calmly, you are somewhere you should not be. I stayed silent. Come out, he continued. There is no need to make this difficult. Another figure appeared behind him. Daniel. He looked different now. No monitors, no bandages, no weakness. He wore a jacket. His hair was neatly combed. He looked like a man who had just stepped out of a meeting. My husband, the man who had kissed my forehead that morning. Emily, he said softly, you are scaring people. That sentence almost made me laugh. He took a step into the room. Please, he said. Let's talk. I pressed my hand over my mouth to steady myself. Talking was how he had always won. Talking was how he had convinced me. Talking was how he had signed my life away. Dr. Ward shifted his weight. You have seen things you do not understand, he said. Medical information can be confusing to the untrained eye. I clenched my jaw. Come back upstairs, Daniel added. You're in shock. Shock. That word again. The same word Hannah had warned me about. Shock was what they expected. Confusion, tears, compliance. If you are listening to this right now, and you have ever ignored a feeling because someone told you that you were overreacting, I need you to hear this. People who want to control you will always call your awareness panic. I stepped out from between the servers. Slowly, deliberately. Daniel exhaled in relief. There you are, he said. Dr. Ward smiled faintly. Good girl, he said. Something inside me hardened. Why is my husband not in recovery? I asked. The question hung in the air. Daniel did not answer immediately. He glanced at Dr. Ward. Just a flicker. But I saw it. He insisted on walking, the doctor replied smoothly. Against advice. I nodded. And the file? I continued. The one that says he was admitted by private vehicle? Dr. Ward's smile thinned. Administrative error. Then why delete the camera footage? I asked. Silence. Daniel's jaw tightened. There is no deleted footage, he said. You imagined it. I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time in 11 years, I saw not my husband, but a stranger rehearsing lines. Tomorrow morning, I said quietly, you plan to operate on me. Daniel stiffened. That is not true, he said. You said anesthetic complications, I continued. High risk. Dr. Ward's eyes narrowed. You are confused, he said. No, I replied. I am awake. The air in the room shifted. Dr. Ward stepped forward. This is becoming dangerous, he said. You are interfering with patient care. I am the patient, I said. According to your plan. Daniel reached for my arm. I flinched back. Don't touch me. The word surprised even me. His hand froze mid-air. Emily, he said, his voice changing, dropping the softness, revealing something sharper underneath. You need to calm down. There it is, I said quietly. That voice. Sophie appeared in the doorway. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed, eyes bright with irritation. This is taking too long, she said. We can't keep chasing her around. Daniel turned to her. Go upstairs. She rolled her eyes. You said this would be easy. The mask slipped. Just for a second. That second told me everything. If you are still listening, stay with me. Because this is the moment where fear either owns you or frees you. Dr. Ward straightened. This conversation is over, he said. You will come with us. No, I replied. Daniel laughed sharply. You don't have a choice. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the room. Not from today, not from the hospital. From weeks earlier, his voice, clear, confident, talking about money, about moving funds, about the insurance, about how no one would question a grieving wife. Sophie's face drained of colour. Dr. Ward swore under his breath. Daniel lunged for the phone. Too late. The file uploaded. A small vibration in my hand told me it was done. Cloud storage. You should have checked my phone, I said. I learned that lesson from you. Daniel froze. What did you do? He asked. I made sure the truth survives me, I replied. Dr. Ward moved fast. Too fast. He grabbed my arm, twisting it behind my back. Pain exploded up my shoulder. Daniel stepped forward. Careful, he said. We still need her alive. Alive. For now. Alarms began to sound. Not fire alarms. Security alarms. Hannah. She had done it. Footsteps thundered down the corridor. Dr. Ward released me and stepped back. Plan B, he muttered. Daniel backed away. His eyes locked onto mine. This time, there was no affection in them. Only calculation. We are not finished, he said. They disappeared down the corridor as security rounded the corner. I slid down against the server rack, shaking, my arms screaming in pain, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might tear free. I was alive. Barely. But I had crossed a line they could not uncross. Behind me, the servers hummed. Steady. Unforgiving. And somewhere upstairs, my husband was already rewriting his plan. Because men like Daniel do not stop when they are exposed. They escalate. The hospital did not explode into chaos. That was the most unsettling part. There were no flashing lights, no raised voices, no dramatic confrontation in the corridor. Instead, everything moved with quiet efficiency, as if what had just happened was not a crisis, but an inconvenience. Security escorted me upstairs, not with concern, but with distance. Their hands never touched me, yet I felt guided, steered, contained. I was not treated like a woman who had nearly been killed. I was treated like a problem that needed isolating. My arm throbbed with every step. My shoulder burned where Dr. Ward had twisted it. But the physical pain was nothing compared to what was settling in my chest. The realization that Daniel was already rewriting the story. I was placed in a private observation room. Not recovery. Not emergency. Observation. The word alone stripped me of agency. A nurse I had never seen before checked my blood pressure, my pulse, my temperature. She spoke in short, rehearsed sentences and avoided my eyes. "Try to rest," she said flatly. "You've had a difficult evening." Difficult. As if my life had not just been itemized and scheduled. The door closed behind her. I heard the lock click. Minutes passed, then an hour. The room was too quiet. Every sound inside my body felt amplified. My breathing, my heartbeat, the faint ringing in my ears that came when adrenaline began to fade. My phone buzzed. One message. From Daniel. "I'm worried about you. Please let them help." I stared at the screen, my fingers numb. Another message followed. "The doctors think you had a panic episode. That happens after trauma." Panic. That word again. It was always panic with him. Never instinct. Never awareness. Never truth. By morning, the narrative was complete. Daniel Collins was a patient who had miraculously survived a serious construction accident. Emily Collins was his fragile wife, overwhelmed by stress, imagination, and fear. When the hospital psychiatrist arrived, she already knew what she was supposed to find. She spoke gently, her tone calm, her posture open. "Emily, have you been sleeping properly? Have you been feeling overwhelmed recently? Do you sometimes feel people are working against you?" The questions were soft. The assumptions were not. I answered carefully, truthfully. But truth sounds irrational when everyone else agrees on a lie. Every sentence I spoke was quietly reframed, noted, filed. By midday, Daniel's solicitor arrived. Not a criminal lawyer, a family lawyer. That detail landed harder than any accusation. Daniel was not preparing to defend himself. He was preparing to manage me. The documents came next. Temporary medical authority, emergency decision rights, interim guardianship, legal language wrapped in concern. Daniel sat opposite me, his posture slumped, his eyes rimmed with red. He looked like a man exhausted by worry, a husband at the edge of despair. "I just want you safe," he said softly. "Until you're better." I wanted to scream, to overturn the table, to tear the papers in half. Instead, I looked down at the documents. If I signed them, Daniel would control every medical decision made about me, every test, every procedure, every diagnosis. This was not escalation. This was erasure. If you are listening to this and thinking you would fight louder, resist harder, refuse outright, understand this. Systems are designed to calm disruption, not to investigate truth. I asked for time. They allowed me 10 minutes. Daniel stepped into the corridor with his solicitor. The door closed behind them, and once again, I was alone. That was when Hannah came back. She was not in uniform this time. Her hair was loose, her posture tense. She looked like someone who knew she was risking everything. "They took me off shift," she whispered. "Security escort. Immediate." My stomach dropped. "They're cleaning up," I said quietly. She nodded. "But not fast enough." She slipped something into my palm. "A USB drive. Everything you copied," she said. "And more." "What more?" I asked. "Financial records," she replied. "Transfers, shell accounts, payments to Ward, private clinic deposits." My breath caught. "They plan to discharge Daniel tomorrow," she continued, "and transfer you." "Transfer me where?" I asked. Hannah hesitated. "A private facility," she said. one he has influence over. The fear returned then, not sharp, not explosive, heavy. This was the part where people disappeared quietly, where paperwork replaced witnesses. If I leave this room, I said, I don't come back. Hannah met my eyes. Then don't leave it the way they expect. She leaned closer. There is one person Daniel did not calculate. Who? I asked. She allowed herself a small, tired smile. You. Before I could respond, the door opened. Daniel returned. Hannah straightened instantly, stepping back into the background, invisible once more. Time's up, Daniel said gently. He slid the documents back toward me. I looked at him. At the man who knew my habits, my fears, my silences. The man who had loved me just enough to learn how to dismantle me. Emily, he said softly. Sign this. Let me take care of you. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled. Not with fear, with rage. I signed. Not my name. A single, deliberate line through the signature. Messy, defiant, unusable. I'm not refusing treatment, I said calmly. I'm requesting an independent assessment. The solicitor stiffened. Daniel's smile faltered for the first time. This delays things, the solicitor said sharply. That's the point, I replied. Silence filled the room. Daniel leaned closer, his voice dropping. You're making this harder than it needs to be. So did you, I whispered back. If you are still listening, stay with me. Because what happened next changed everything. That night, my phone rang. An unknown number, I answered. A woman's voice, low, controlled, tired. You don't know me, she said. But I know Daniel Collins. My blood ran cold. He did this before, she continued, with his first wife. The room tilted. She trusted the process, the woman said. And she didn't survive it. The call ended. I sat there in the dark, the USB drive warm in my hand, my heart pounding. Daniel had not invented this plan. He had perfected it. I was not his first attempt. Outside my door, footsteps paused. A key slid into the lock. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. Daniel was no longer trying to persuade me. He was running out of time. The woman called again the next morning. Not on my mobile. On the phone mounted to the wall beside my hospital bed. The one the nurses had told me was reserved for internal use only. That was the moment I understood something had shifted. Daniel was no longer just manipulating people. He was embedded inside the system. I can't speak for long, the woman said. They are watching my number. Her voice was steady, but there was a weight beneath it. Not panic, not hysteria. The kind of exhaustion that comes from surviving something you were never supposed to survive. My name is Claire, she continued. I was married to Daniel Collins before you. The words did not crash into me. They settled, like dust after a building collapses. I sat on the edge of the bed, the USB drive warm in my palm, the white walls of the room suddenly feeling much closer than before. He told everyone I was unstable, Claire said. Depression, anxiety, paranoia. My chest tightened. He told doctors I imagined threats, she went on. He told my family I needed supervision. I closed my eyes. And then, she said quietly, he took control of my medical care. The room seemed to shrink. He never hit me, Claire added. Not once. That's how he kept it clean. She explained everything slowly, methodically. Daniel insisted on private consultations, on specialists he recommended, on facilities that promised discretion. He framed it as care, as protection, as love. Until one morning, Claire woke up in a private clinic she had never agreed to enter. Sedated, disoriented, alone. They told me I had signed consent forms, she said. I hadn't. My stomach twisted. They said complications were possible, she continued. And when they happened, no one questioned them. Claire survived because something went wrong. Not with her body, with Daniel's timing. A nurse changed shifts unexpectedly. A junior doctor asked a question he wasn't meant to ask. By the time Claire understood how close she had come to being erased, Daniel was already gone. New city, new job, new wife, me. He didn't improvise with you, Claire said. He refined it. The line went dead. I sat there holding the receiver long after the dial tone returned. This was no longer a single crime. It was a pattern. And patterns leave trails. That afternoon, the hospital's internal compliance team arrived. No announcement. No press. 3 people in neutral suits, carrying tablets instead of clipboards. They asked for Daniel. Daniel was suddenly unavailable. Transferred for further assessment. Delayed by procedure. Complicated. They asked for Dr. Ward. Dr. Ward was in surgery. Extended. Unreachable. Then they asked for me. For the first time since arriving, my door opened without a key. They did not rush me. They did not comfort me. They listened. Closely. I gave them the USB drive. The altered medical files. The financial transfers. The surveillance footage. I told them about Claire. About the call. About the pattern. One of them paused the video. "Who authorized this edit?" she asked. No one answered. By evening, the hospital felt different. Quieter. Sharper. Staff spoke in lowered voices. Security doubled. Phones rang and stopped ringing. Daniel felt it before anyone told him. He came to my room just before midnight. Not calm. Not controlled. Angry. "You went behind my back," he said, closing the door too hard. I stayed seated. "You lied to them," he continued. "You humiliated me." There it was. Not fear. Not concern. Reputation. "They're investigating," I said evenly. He laughed. "Investigations disappear," he replied. "Stories get rewritten." "You're not listening anymore," I said. "That's new for you." He stepped closer. "You think one phone call scares me?" he asked. "You think files scare me?" I met his eyes. "You're not in control of this room anymore." His jaw tightened. "This ends now," he said. That was when the second domino fell. A nurse entered. Then another. Then hospital security. Daniel turned, stunned. "Who authorized this?" he demanded. The senior nurse replied calmly. "The board." Daniel looked back at me. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. He was escorted out, not arrested, not accused, removed. And that frightened him more than handcuffs ever could. The story did not break that night. It leaked, carefully. An anonymous compliance report, a financial irregularity, a procedural review. By morning, journalists were calling the hospital. By afternoon, they were calling me. Daniel's lawyer called too. Threats, defamation, privacy, civil action. He stopped calling when the second woman came forward. Then the third. Different cities, same language, same structure, private clinics, consent forms, sedation. Daniel vanished from the ward, left the hospital, left the city. But systems move slowly, and predators rely on speed. This time, speed belonged to us. The final domino fell a week later. Daniel was arrested in the car park of a private medical facility, not for attempted murder, for fraud, financial misconduct, conspiracy, paper crimes, the kind that stick. As he was led away, he saw me. Across barriers, across cameras. He did not look angry. He looked confused, as if the world had broken a rule he believed in. I did not wave. I did not smile. I simply stood there, alive. If you are still listening to this story, understand why I am telling it now. Men like Daniel do not look dangerous. They look organized, helpful, convincing. They do not rush. They prepare, and they depend on your silence. My name is Emily Collins, and I am not the ending he planned. The silence after Daniel's arrest did not feel like relief. It felt like a vacuum. For days, my name disappeared from the hospital corridors. Nurses avoided eye contact. Doctors spoke in careful sentences, as if every word might be replayed later in a courtroom. Daniel was gone, but his shadow remained. I was discharged quietly, without ceremony. No apology, no explanation. Just paperwork and a ride home, arranged by people who refused to meet my eyes. Home did not feel like safety. It felt like a crime scene that had learned how to breathe again. I slept on the sofa the first night, fully dressed, my phone charging beside me, every light left on. When sleep finally came, it was shallow and fractured, broken by dreams where corridors never ended and doors never opened. By morning, the legal machine had started to turn. Daniel's solicitor requested access to our shared financial accounts. His firm filed an injunction to prevent me from speaking publicly. A letter arrived, warning me about defamatory statements and emotional exaggeration. The language was cold, precise, designed to exhaust. This was Daniel's real battlefield. Not hospitals, not operating theatres, paper. I met my lawyer that afternoon. She was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed, unimpressed by theatrics. She read through everything in silence. The USB contents, the compliance reports, Claire's statement, the statements from the other women. When she finally looked up, her expression did not soften. "He's dangerous," she said simply. "And not because he's violent." She explained the strategy. Daniel would not try to prove innocence. He would try to discredit, to frame me as unstable, as reactive, as someone who had misinterpreted events during stress. "The system listens more easily to calm men than distressed women," she said. "We're going to use documents, not emotion." For the first time in weeks, I felt something like alignment. That evening, Daniel tried to contact me, not directly, through my mother. He told her I was unwell, that I had imagined threats, that he was worried about my mental state. She called me in tears. "Emily," she said, "he sounds so convincing." That sentence hurt more than anything else, because I knew exactly how convincing he could be. If you are listening to this and wondering why women don't leave sooner, don't speak sooner, don't scream louder, understand this. It is not fear that traps you. It is doubt planted by someone you once trusted. The court hearing was scheduled for the following week. Temporary financial control, access to shared assets, a request to review my capacity. Daniel did not attend in person. He appeared by video link, calm, measured, sympathetic. "I love my wife," he said. "I just want her protected." I watched his face on the screen and realized something unsettling. He believed this version of himself. The judge asked me to speak. My hands trembled, but my voice did not. I did not tell my story the way I had lived it. I told it the way systems understand truth. Dates, times, transfers, authorizations. I watched Daniel's expression change. Not panic, calculation. Then my lawyer introduced Claire. "Live." "In person." Daniel stiffened. Claire spoke calmly, with no anger left in her voice. She described the same pattern, the same language, the same clinics. She did not accuse. She documented. By the time the third woman appeared, Daniel stopped taking notes. For the first time, he looked small. The judge adjourned the hearing. Daniel's requests were denied, temporarily. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited. I said nothing. That night, my phone rang again. An unknown number. This time, it was Daniel. His voice was lower, controlled, but strained. "You think this is over?" he asked. I said nothing. "You've embarrassed me," he continued. "You've damaged things you don't understand." I finally spoke. "You damaged them first." He exhaled sharply. "This ends with you isolated," he said. "No money, no credibility." I replied quietly. "You're already isolated." The call ended. 2 days later, the arrest became public. Not dramatic, not loud. A financial crimes unit executed a warrant related to Daniel's consulting firm. Accounts frozen, devices seized. The narrative shifted from concerned husband to subject of investigation. Daniel did not contact me again. Instead, his lawyers did. They proposed a settlement. Silence in exchange for assets. My lawyer slid the papers across the table. I did not pick them up. "No," I said. "Not this time." The final moment came unexpectedly. I was walking home from the solicitor's office when I saw him. Daniel. Across the street. No cameras. No lawyers. Just a man standing still, watching me. For a second, the world narrowed to the space between us. He raised his hand slightly. Not a wave, not a threat. An unfinished gesture. I did not cross the street. I did not turn away. I met his eyes, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. Not control, not confidence, fear, the real kind. He turned and walked away. That was when I understood something important. This story was no longer about survival. It was about reclaiming authorship. Daniel no longer controlled the ending, and the ending was close. The days after the hearing did not bring closure. They brought something far more unsettling. Waiting. Daniel was no longer visible, but he was not gone. His presence lingered in unanswered emails, postponed hearings, and the careful distance people kept when they spoke to me. Friends checked in, then slowly checked out. Colleagues offered sympathy, but avoided details. Everyone wanted the story to end neatly. Real life does not work that way. My solicitor warned me early. When cases like this don't collapse immediately, she said, it's because something is being held back. She was right. 2 weeks after the court appearance, a sealed document arrived at her office. Not from Daniel, not from his firm, from a third party, a private medical consultancy group I had never heard of. They claimed Daniel had acted independently, that he had misrepresented affiliations, that they were cooperating fully. But cooperation arrived with conditions: silence, delays, redactions, names removed, dates blurred, entire pages missing. Daniel was no longer the center. He was becoming a symptom. That was the moment I understood the scale of what I had stepped into. This was not about one man abusing one system. It was about how many systems were willing to look away. My nights changed. I stopped dreaming about hospitals. Instead, I dreamed about doors that opened onto other doors, corridors that led nowhere, faces that smiled without eyes. I began writing everything down: dates, calls, names, moments that felt insignificant but refused to leave my mind. Survivors learn this instinctively. Details are anchors. One evening, Claire called again. Her voice sounded different this time, sharper. They contacted me, she said. Who? I asked. The same group, she replied. The consultancy. They asked if I would be willing to clarify my statement. Clarify. They offered legal support, she continued, and compensation. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What did you say? I asked. I asked what they wanted me to forget. She paused. They didn't deny anything, she added. They just said Daniel was an outlier. An outlier. A convenient word. That night, I received an email from an unknown address. No greeting. No signature. Just one line. You are damaging more than you realize. I showed it to my solicitor the next morning. She did not look surprised. This is pressure, she said, not a threat, yet. The word yet lingered. Public interest grew in waves. Some articles framed me as brave. Others questioned my motives. Anonymous comments speculated, suggested exaggeration, suggested profit. The old narrative tried to return. Unstable woman, ambitious wife, misinterpretation. Daniel's voice never appeared in these stories, but his fingerprints were everywhere. Then came the financial audit. Not mine. His. Accounts once frozen began to reveal movement. Transfers made years earlier. Payments routed through consulting fees and advisory retainers. Daniel had not just planned exits, he had funded them. The prosecution widened its scope. So did the resistance. One afternoon, I was followed. Not closely. Not obviously. A car that appeared twice on my walk home. A figure who crossed the street when I did. When I stopped, they stopped. When I turned, they vanished. I reported it. Nothing came of it. No crime. No proof. Just awareness. Claire experienced the same thing. So did one of the other women. Different cities. Same pattern. Someone wanted us unsettled. If you are listening to this and expecting a clear victory at this point, understand this. Power does not retreat dramatically. It withdraws quietly and waits. The next hearing was postponed, then postponed again. Procedural issues, jurisdictional reviews, new counsel. Daniel remained in legal limbo. Not convicted, not free, suspended. That uncertainty began to fracture him. He broke silence once. Through a statement released by his lawyers, he denied wrongdoing, expressed concern for all parties, requested privacy. No apology, no acknowledgement, just distance. The most dangerous posture of all. I was offered a choice. A private meeting, off the record, mediated, closure, they called it. My solicitor advised against it, but I asked for time, not because I wanted peace, but because I wanted answers. The meeting was scheduled, neutral location, security present, no recording devices. Daniel did not attend. Instead, 2 representatives appeared, not lawyers, executives. They spoke carefully. About reputational risk, about mutual harm, about moving forward. They asked what I wanted. I answered honestly. I want the truth documented, I said, not buried. They exchanged a look. That may not be possible, one replied. And there it was, confirmation. There was more, much more. After the meeting, my solicitor said quietly, "You've crossed into institutional territory now." That night, I stood in my kitchen, the house silent around me, and realized something profound. I had stopped asking how to survive this. I had started asking how far it went. The ending I once imagined no longer fit. This story was not closing. It was widening. And somewhere inside that widening circle, Daniel was no longer the most dangerous figure. He was simply the first one exposed. I used to believe that exposing Daniel was the hardest part. I was wrong. The hardest part was realizing that Daniel had never been alone. Once the investigation widened, his name began appearing less frequently in the documents. Not because he was innocent, but because he was no longer the most important piece. He was the access point. My solicitor started mapping connections on a whiteboard in her office. Private clinics, consultancy groups, legal intermediaries, shell companies with respectable addresses. Each one, on its own, looked ordinary, professional, legitimate. Together, they formed something else. A network designed not to kill, but to manage risk. Human risk. Daniel wasn't the architect, my solicitor said quietly. He was the operator. That distinction changed everything. The financial audit uncovered patterns that went back more than a decade. Payments routed through advisory fees. Retainers that coincided with medical referrals. Bonuses released after successful case resolutions. No names, no diagnoses, just numbers that repeated too often to be coincidence. What struck me most was how normal it all looked. Invoices neatly filed. Emails politely worded. Meetings scheduled weeks in advance. There was no urgency. Because this system did not rely on speed. It relied on patience. Claire was brought in again, this time not as a witness, but as context. So were the others. Their stories overlapped in ways that felt impossible to ignore once you saw them laid side by side. The same language used by different doctors. The same reassurance phrases. The same emphasis on discretion. Best for everyone. Temporary. Preventative care. Words designed to soothe. One of the women noticed something first. A signature, not a name. A style. The same looping initial on multiple consent forms across different facilities. Different patients. Different years. Same hand. The prosecution brought in a forensic document examiner. The result was quiet, but decisive. The forms had not been signed by the patients. They had been standardized, mass-produced. That was when the story stopped being about Daniel's cruelty and started being about efficiency. I struggled with that realization. It is easier to hate a villain than to confront a machine. Machines don't feel. They don't hesitate. They don't apologize. They optimize. As the investigation expanded, pressure increased. Not directly, indirectly. Funding for one clinic was frozen. Another quietly closed, for restructuring. A senior administrator resigned for personal reasons. No statements. No admissions. Just movement. My solicitor warned me that this phase was dangerous. Exposure creates resistance, she said. And resistance doesn't always come from the people you expect, she advised caution. Limited movement. No interviews. But silence has a cost too. Meanwhile, Daniel remained in limbo, not charged, not released. He had stopped being useful. That was when he tried to talk. Through his lawyer, he requested a mediated conversation, off the record. He wanted to provide context. I declined, not out of fear, out of clarity. Daniel did not want truth. He wanted leverage. Then something unexpected happened. A man contacted us, not a victim, an insider. He had worked in compliance for one of the consultancy groups tied to Daniel, mid-level, unremarkable, the kind of person systems depend on to keep things moving quietly. He brought documents, internal risk assessments, email chains discussing containment scenarios, meeting notes where phrases like acceptable exposure and manageable fallout appeared repeatedly. He was shaking when he handed them over. I thought it was theoretical, he said, until I saw the outcomes. He did not know Daniel personally. That detail mattered. This was not loyalty. It was conscience. The documents confirmed what we had begun to suspect. There was an informal protocol, not written, not official, but understood. When a patient became inconvenient, costly, or unpredictable, the system moved to stabilize the situation. Stabilize meant control. Control meant isolation. Isolation meant silence. Deaths were not required, just compliance. That was how they avoided scrutiny. That was how they survived. The prosecution called it systemic abuse. The media would later call it something else. But at that moment, it felt like standing at the edge of something vast. Daniel had believed he was indispensable. He wasn't. He was replaceable, and that terrified him. For the first time since his arrest, he broke down. Not publicly. In custody. His lawyer reported emotional distress. Requests were made for medical consideration. The irony was not lost on me. The same language, the same framing. The system was turning inward. But machines do not collapse quickly. They grind, slowly. Grinding is dangerous because it creates pressure points. And pressure points create mistakes. One of those mistakes came when a junior journalist published a partial leak. Not enough to expose the whole network, enough to alert it. Suddenly, there were statements, denials, legal threats. The narrative attempted to reframe. Rare misconduct. Individual failures. No evidence of coordination. But the insider documents contradicted them. Quietly, relentlessly. I was advised again to stay silent, to let the process work. But something in me resisted. Silence had protected them for years, and I was done contributing to that protection. This was no longer about my survival. It was about whether truth could exist inside structures designed to erase it. I agreed to one interview, not live. Recorded. With conditions. No sensationalism. No editing. Just facts. The reporter listened carefully, asked precise questions, did not interrupt. When it aired, it did not explode. It spread, steadily. That was the beginning of the end. Not the dramatic kind, the structural kind. Behind the scenes, inquiries multiplied. Audits overlapped. Oversight bodies started asking the same questions at the same time. The network could not answer all of them consistently. Contradictions appeared. Files resurfaced. Timelines shifted. The machine began to stutter. And somewhere inside that stuttering system, Daniel realized something too late. He had never been in control. He had only been tolerated. And now, he was expendable. The moment the interview aired, everything changed. Not overnight, not explosively, but irreversibly. It did not lead with outrage. It did not accuse wildly. It simply laid out facts, dates, documents, patterns, and that was far more dangerous than emotion. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Not on the front pages at first. On legal blogs, medical ethics forums, professional networks where doctors and administrators spoke to one another in careful language. Then it crossed over. Mainstream media picked it up the next morning. By lunchtime, Daniel's name was no longer being mentioned alone. It was mentioned alongside institutions. That was the turning point. Statements were released almost immediately, carefully worded, lawyer approved, designed to distance. We take these matters seriously. We are conducting internal reviews. We have no evidence of systemic wrongdoing. The same phrases appeared across different organizations, identical, as if copied and pasted. But something had shifted. People started talking, not publicly at first, privately, anonymously. Emails began arriving at my solicitor's office. Doctors, nurses, former administrators. Most of them did not claim crimes. They claimed discomfort, things that had never sat right, instructions that had felt odd, cases that had been rushed through quietly. One email stood out. Short, direct. I was told not to ask questions. I didn't. Someone nearly died. That message came from a junior anaesthetist. He agreed to meet. Off the record, he described a case from years earlier. A patient transferred late at night, sedated before full assessment, paperwork already prepared. When I asked who authorized it, he said, I was told it was already approved at a higher level. By whom? He never knew. He only knew that after the procedure went wrong, the case disappeared. No review. No follow-up. Just silence. He was not the only one. A former clinic manager came forward next. She brought scheduling records, internal memos, lists of patients flagged as sensitive. Sensitive meant expensive, unpredictable, legally risky. The word appeared again and again. This was no longer about Daniel. This was about how risk was managed. The press smelled blood, but not in the way they usually do. This was not scandal for entertainment. This was scandal for accountability. A parliamentary committee announced an inquiry. Regulatory bodies opened parallel investigations. Hospitals began suspending partnerships, pending review. The network started cutting itself apart to survive. And Daniel? Daniel watched from custody. He released a statement, longer than the last one, sharper, more defensive. He denied involvement, denied coordination, denied knowledge. He framed himself as a consultant, a facilitator, a man misled by others. For the first time, he pointed upward, not directly, but enough. That was when the most unexpected witness appeared, a woman named Margaret. She was older than the others, calmer, unshakable. She had not contacted my lawyer. She contacted a journalist. She said she had been waiting for this moment. Her husband had died 12 years earlier, not suddenly, not dramatically, after a sequence of medical decisions that had been framed as precautionary. She brought records, original copies, not summaries, signatures, timelines, emails. Daniel's name appeared once, not prominently, but enough. Margaret spoke publicly. No anger, no tears, just precision. She described how every step had been justified, how every doubt had been softened, how questioning had been discouraged politely. Her story changed everything, because it reframed the narrative. This was not about abuse alone. It was about consent being engineered. Public reaction intensified. Commentators stopped asking, how could this happen? They started asking, how often does this happen? The institutions responded by closing ranks. Legal challenges were filed. Injunctions requested. Threats made quietly. But the volume was too great. Too many voices. Too many documents. Daniel requested to speak again. This time, publicly. The request was denied. Instead, prosecutors amended their strategy. New charges were considered, not just against individuals, but against entities. The concept of responsibility widened, and with it, the risk. I was asked to testify again, this time, not as a victim, but as a witness to a system. The room was larger, the audience broader, the stakes higher. I spoke slowly, not about fear, not about pain, about processes. What happened when questions were asked? What happened when they weren't? I could feel the shift. People were no longer listening out of sympathy. They were listening for recognition. Afterwards, a woman stopped me in the corridor. She did not give her name. She said, I thought it was just me. That sentence echoed everywhere. The network did not collapse, but it cracked. Audits expanded. Resignations followed. Policies were rewritten. Too late for many, but not for all. Daniel was moved to a different facility, For his own safety, they said. Isolation has a way of clarifying things. According to his lawyer, he had begun asking questions about who would protect him, about what would happen next. For the first time, Daniel was experiencing uncertainty without control. That terrified him. The story had reached its peak, not in spectacle, but in consequence, and as the noise grew louder, one truth became impossible to ignore. This was bigger than revenge, bigger than justice. It was about whether silence could still be sold as professionalism, and the answer was starting to look like no. The final moment did not arrive with a verdict. It arrived quietly, with acceptance. Months passed after the investigations began. The cameras moved on. Headlines found new stories. Life, as it always does, learned how to continue with unfinished truths. But beneath that calm surface, something permanent had changed. Institutions rarely fall apart. They adjust. What once operated in silence now had to answer questions. Oversight grew. Reporting channels multiplied. Procedures were rewritten, not perfectly, but honestly. It wasn't justice the way films promise it, but it was accountability. Daniel never stood in a dramatic courtroom scene. Instead, he faded into paperwork. Charges accumulated slowly. Financial misconduct, fraud, obstruction. Not one loud ending, but many small reckonings. He accepted a plea agreement, not because he was remorseful, but because he understood the odds. He cooperated. He confirmed details. He named structures. And in doing so, he became small. I never saw him again. Not across a street. Not in a hallway. Not in a courtroom. Our last connection was a document, a formal apology written by lawyers, carefully phrased, emotionally empty. I didn't reply. Some apologies aren't meant to be felt. They're meant to be recorded. Claire moved abroad. She said she needed distance from a place that had nearly erased her. Margaret returned to her coastal town. She began speaking quietly at ethics forums, not as a campaigner, but as a reminder. The other women rebuilt their lives in their own ways. Some changed names. Some changed work. Some chose silence. All of them chose to live. People often ask me the wrong question. They ask, "Do you feel closure?" Closure is a comforting idea, but it isn't real. What I felt instead was authorship. For the first time, my story belonged to me. I returned to ordinary life slowly. Shopping, trains, evenings that ended without checking the door twice. Fear still appeared sometimes, an unfamiliar number, a face that lingered a moment too long, but fear no longer directed the story. I did. I now work quietly with an independent oversight group, not to relive the past, but because silence spreads, and so does courage. Sometimes I'm asked if it was worth it. The scrutiny, the exhaustion, the cost. I don't answer quickly. Because the answer isn't emotional, it's practical. People are alive who might not have been. Systems hesitate where they once moved freely. Questions are asked where silence used to be rewarded. That matters. If you're listening to this and recognizing parts of your own life, remember this. Danger doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives organized, helpful, reassuring. It speaks the language of care while quietly building control. And it survives on one thing: silence. Breaking that silence doesn't guarantee safety, but keeping it guarantees harm. My name is Emily Collins. I was never meant to survive this story. I was meant to disappear inside it. Instead, I lived beyond it. And if this story stays with you after the video ends, let it stay for this reason. Truth doesn't need to shout to be powerful. It only needs to be spoken. Once, by someone who refuses to forget. If you had been in this situation, what would you have done?